I am with Jeff McNeil Seymour, who is one of the co-curators and artists involved in our Two-Spirit exhibition. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why this exhibit is so important and your involvement in it?
This exhibit is so important at this time because we are in this place called Canada, celebrating 150 years of Confederation. So often with these narratives and these dialogues, these national imaginaries, if you will, Two-Spirit people are often silenced or excluded out of those dialogues. And the work that I do back in so-called British Columbia, the research that I'm a part of is really pointing to the fact that Two-Spirit youth in particular are the most vulnerable. And so it's important for those of us that are doing this work, that are doing this artwork, that we've come up through, the LGBTQ community or whatever communities it is that we're a part of, to hold space, to hold presence, and recognize that there's many eyes watching us, aside from just Indigenous bodies, but we have such an important part of protecting and holding and imagining ways forward together. Mm-hmm.
Tell us about the dress you created.
So the dress that I've created, it's actually gone through a number of manifestations. So this is actually the original, but I actually also did a piece and hung it in the Factor Inwantosh Faculty of Social Work at the University of Toronto. I was doing my master's degree there. And it was interesting because it was just such a contained space. So it's just I've never really received the feedback as which it's been really overwhelming to be a part of Never Apart, because I was just like arriving, a flight being delayed, and then showing up and people lined up to see this piece. It's really exciting because I don't sew, but my moms have helped, have done the sewing piece for me. But I guess I'm a little bit like Ai Weiwei or a number of other artists that do that visioning of like, okay, so this is what I want to happen. And so they took that, did the sewing for me. My whole piece about this is to unsettle the narrative. And what's upsetting to me as a Two-Spirit person is that artist Jamie Black just recently did the red dress installation at the University of Toronto. And as I was monitoring all of the media coming out of that, again, here's this moment where missing and murdered Indigenous women takes the foreground, and rightfully so. But all of the grassroots organizations from across this place called Canada, like Violence No More, even our Secwepemc Women's Warrior Society, recognize transgender and Two-Spirit bodies and girls and men and boys within that discourse. And so it's important that, however we're interrupting these spaces, and so I think about artist Jamie Black, that we really need to make sure that we're holding everybody up, and that because we're not going to heal unless everybody is sitting in the circle together. And that also includes our settler allies and our settler relatives here. Mm-hmm. And so it's just such a wonderful opportunity to share this piece with Never Apart and with everybody that's come through. The dress itself, I think, is really impactful because the etherealness of the fabric is meant to represent that invisibility, the silencing, the erasure, where having the map on the front, and it's one of the most well thought out pieces of that document indigeneity on this continent. It really is just beautiful to look at the fluidity of the territorial boundaries of Indigenous nations across the land. So our teaching in Secwepemc is if a woman has an abortion or miscarries, that she carries that spirit with her for the rest of her life. And so my sisters and cousins that I've talked to, anytime they've gone to see a medicine person, they always have had that piece identified. So I think then about, we're just now witnessing the inquiry, the national inquiry that's happening right now, put on hold to take care of whatever it is that's happening with that piece. So it's a timely moment to bring this forward, that because collectively as a nation, until this issue of missing and murdered bodies, Indigenous bodies, is solved and looked after in a meaningful and a good way, that collectively we all carry, as represented by the hair on the back of the dress, the responsibility for the murdered. And if you look closely at it, the rest of the pattern is left unfinished because, again, the narrative is not complete, and those missing bodies that are also gone.
Tell us a little bit about the work you do in British Columbia and what you've been in school for.
The work that I do, it's been really interesting since leaving to Toronto from Mississauga, the New Territory, or Ontario, if you will. Returning back to my home territory and living and moving back into reserve. I didn't grow up on the reserve, so having the education that I do, walking between worlds, between being an educator at Thompson Rivers University as a sessional instructor. I'm a part of the Wild Salmon Warrior Rally and the Secwepemc Women's Warrior Society. I also, help with different research agendas and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of work to take on for one person, and so really just like figuring out the ebb and the flow of being able to do that. So so one of the biggest pieces that I'm working on right now is through the Faculty of Nursing at UBC, and so we're looking at the data coming out of rural British Columbia, and it's revealing that our Two-Spirit youth are the most vulnerable, and we know that. We know that here, but it's just really it's not great, but it's great that we have that empirical evidence to be able to point to that and to not only unsettle our own Indigenous communities, because residential schools have imposed, heteropatriarchy into our communities. It's also imposed homophobia and transphobia, but at the same time, it also unsettles non-Indigenous communities as well in a call to action. One of the interesting pieces that my friend Dr. Cameron Greensmith from Toronto did is that he went around to all of the queer service providers in Toronto and interviewed all of the frontline service workers, which were predominantly gay white men. And what his research revealed was Indigenous people, in particular Two-Spirit people living in Toronto trying to access service, were marked as undesirable because A, they were street entrenched and smelled, and so they didn't want them in the office, or they were not passable in their trans identity, so there was somewhere else for them to go, or they were drinking hand sanitizer and not vodka, so there's somewhere else for them to go. And so we also need to be thinking about and unsettling homo-nationalist discourses and queer and trans-settler colonialisms as well, to unpack that we're all in this together to reimagine ways forward. And so that in itself is the work that I do originating from within so-called British Columbia, from my home nation of Secwepemc.
In a nutshell, for people who don't know what Two-Spirit means, tell us about what it means to you and how you fit into that.
So, Two-Spirit identity is an umbrella term. It was brought into being in the late 90s. A group of activists have needed a way to articulate our lived experiences as LGBTQ identified. But what they started to notice is like, well, how do our Indigenous selves intersect in the community, right? So they decided that the term Two-Spirit would be that doorway, if you will, the umbrella for it. But it's now, it's about Two-Spirit identifies our spiritual connections, our family connections, our connections to land, our connections to water, our connections to ceremony. And so that's some of the pieces that make it markedly different than LGBTQ identities. And so we're in a period of resurgence right now where Two-Spirit, yes, is perhaps, we're rethinking what Two-Spirit means. And so it's really now about an exploration of coming into community and exploring within your own nations, your own indigenous nations' dialect or language, what that word is and what those roles and responsibilities and space and place and belongingness, what that looks like.
Tell us a little bit about the highlights of this exhibit. There's 6 people brought together. Tell us what you felt walking into the gallery and seeing all of the art.
Well, it was just it's I think that it's exciting to see, you come in and you're faced with this beautiful wallpaper from Kent Monkman, and I'm like literally pinching myself. I'm like, here's this person whose artwork has been so inspiring and has been the point of perspective and so many PowerPoint presentations to articulate experience. So that's been really neat to witness and to observe. And this is the first time that I've met Dana Danger, and so to see Dana's work and I just to see the video presentations and the celebration of body and sexuality is just such a beautiful thing. And so it's just been really a beautiful confluence, and which is fitting. Here we are on the St. Lawrence River, so many tributaries and confluences and things coming together, and then as you move through, then there's my address, and we'll just leave that where it is for now. But, being in the room with Preston Buffalo and his brilliant art and color and textures and exploration of self, bringing his own personal narrative through of everything that he's, who he is and is being and becoming is such a powerful moment. And then to be able to continue through the room and to witness Fallon Samard's work, the video installation, and to just watch the colors and the sounds and all of that visual piece that they've brought forward and their work is just this co-curating this from across the country. It's just so mind-blowing to me that it's not mind-blowing. It's just really beautiful to know that this was such a poignant moment for this to happen, and that it all collectively just comes together so naturally. And so I think that also really speaks to our relationship. We've known each other for, oh my gosh, like almost 20 years now.
20. Yeah.
So for that to now be happening, it's just, it's
awesome.
Brilliant. Yeah.
Yay. What is next? I mean, what are the next steps that need to be taken with this dialogue and moving forward with the 150th anniversary of Canada?
Well, it's really exciting. Just from my own social media, people are like, where is this going to be next? Right. So I think that we've talked a little bit about this being a continuing dialogue, and that perhaps maybe this becomes part of future installations, or whether we have the opportunity to find another home for the installation, or to continue inviting new and fresh faces in to help support up and coming, and up and coming artists, Two-Spirit artists, to really hold that up. And I think that that's, again, really speaks to that reconciliation and the responsibilities of our LGBTQ family, our settler family, to hold that space and to help everybody to achieve equity and equality.
Very great. Thank you.
Thank you.